who dig. In this world.
What are we doing?
What's up, everybody, and welcome to Outlawed Thoughts, episode 37. I'm here with Kareem Mays on this side. Gotta remove my reverse there. We're gonna do a quick episode. This is just gonna be about 30 minutes. We're gonna go over the Kanye stuff, and I've got a bunch of other random news stories queued up that I was gonna cover a few days ago, but I got kind of screwed up with the whole waking up early to do interviews and stuff. Did an episode with Kurt Wuckert Jr., which turned out really good. It was a decent interview. Got a lot of traction on Twitter, which was good. Still getting notifications from that stuff, so that has been interesting. Joined a couple crypto things from that I'm going to be kind of digging into and looking at here over the future. And I am putting together sort of a cryptocurrency roundtable episode here in the future that I'm hoping to include Kurt and Mitch from the Swamp Creatures into. I'm going to hopefully get him to bring over a few people and have maybe a whole round, kind of 8 people or so, just to chat about cryptocurrency in total. I know there's a lot of information going on right now, people talking about pulling money off of exchanges and all of that, and I do agree with people there. If you've got a lot of money in exchanges, I'd say try to get a cold storage wallet and go that route, because it appears like a lot of those exchanges are just going the way of the shitter.
Kind of.
Really quick. I know there's obviously a lot of misinformation.
There's a caveat, I would say.
Right. Definitely.
There's the same thing with banking.
Yeah. But we're gonna start by covering this Kanye stuff. I suppose we can just react directly to the video of him on Timcast and then go from there. So Kanye West went on Timcast with Nick Fuentes and Milo Yiannopoulos.
Which I have something interesting I have 2 interesting things that I just want to point out, which is one. Milo to me was kind of popular around like Trump's first thing in 2016 and a little after that. But then he just fell off the earth and came back, which to me is kind of weird. Why exactly? I don't know. Because it's not like I don't see he changed much.
Okay, so
but
I want to address that, but I want to start with this because so when I talk about this, which I want to get into the nitty gritty of it, but the way that I'm going to separate it is I'm going to talk about Ye, I'm going to talk about Tim and his group, and then I'm going to talk about Fuentes and Milo, because I think those are 3 separate entities, and I'm going to discuss why in a second.
I'll bring up Adam Krigler somewhere because I saw that video.
Yeah, that's a whole shit show that I've been digging into over the last couple of weeks. Okay, so let's go ahead and watch some of this.
You're not gonna take, if we can't, you're not gonna take my pain away, right? The Jewish people say it's the Holocaust, this happened, and you can't say anything about it. We can't take their pain away. No one's gonna denounce the fact that they tried to lock me up. That's what, because every time I'm just holding stride, and it's like I thought I was more Malcolm X, but I find out I'm more MLK because as I'm getting hosed down every day by the press and financially, I'm just standing there. And when I found out that they tried to put me in jail, it was like a dog was biting my arm, and I almost shed a tear, almost, but I still walked in stride through it. Yeah.
I think they've been extremely unfair to you. I think.
Who was they though? We can't say who they is,
corporate
can we?
press. I'm not using I don't use the word as the.
So this is where I'm going to stop it. So
We're not going the rest of it.
well, okay. All right. Yeah, let's keep
As the way I guess
We can
you
go
guys
the full.
use. I'm talking
It is
about
them, though, isn't it? I mean, because
No.
because when you think about it, consider it. In 2018,
What do you mean it's not?
What do I mean? Like, okay, so how about? Are you leaving?
Are you referring to the press?
He's gone. I'll say it right now. You guys, you guys want to bring that stuff up, and then
Have
think
the
we're not going to
discussion.
have a
Like,
conversation.
have the discussion.
Like you think Ye's going to come in here and say, "Here's my pain, here's my suffering." I'm going to say, "I hear you," and then he's going to say, "And it was Jewish people," and I'm going to be like, "Okay, but don't you consider?" It's like, I'm not going to do this. I
gotta
refuse.
Go, make sure he's cool.
All right, go for it. Luke and I will have a conversation. So I can't say I'm surprised. What do I even do? Other than ask him, please elaborate on this. Are you referring to individuals, or are you quite literally blaming an entire group of people for the fact that powerful individuals are causing you harm?
I really wanted to ask Nick about his thoughts about MLK because I know they contradict his comments about that. But
So at this point, Kanye has walked out, and Milo Yiannopoulos has followed behind to go quote unquote check on him, and left Fuentes sitting at the table.
Yeah, and I heard Fuentes left a little bit after that.
I think it was about 10 or 15 minutes later.
again, these are mass generalizations that don't really help anyone in my perspective. They just kind of sound like their opposition. They sound what they're kind of going against, the woke mob that's always saying white men are responsible for everything. When I see people just use generalizations, it kind of cheapens the conversations. It cheapens a dialogue that we could have here that I was planning to talk to Ye about, specifically bringing up like, hey, let's actually talk about this in a real concise way. Let's not get emotional. Let's not walk out of here. Let's actually
let me
control
tell all you
ourselves.
guys outright. I said this is going to be a big issue. Before the show, obviously, people are going to bring up the questions of anti-Semitism. Why don't we talk about the news? I want to hear what happened with this meeting. I want to understand what Ye 24 is, and then we can do a longer conversation about any of that stuff. And Ye, literally in the first 5 minutes, says, "No, I want to talk about a group of people and point to them." Whatever, man. This, you want to know why? Look, you're not going to sit here and you're going to walk out of the room. You're free to do so, man. But literally, I said a couple sentences about, I don't think that's fair. Did I insult the man? He seriously can't handle. He can't handle it.
He also left during the Pierce Morgan interview he did, but he came back. So again, we should be able to have this conversation. What's up, Chris?
He wants his phone.
Oh, yeah.
Look, man.
Okay.
All right.
So first off, I think for a second there they thought he might come back in, and I know Fuentes does hang out and try to kind of chat it out here, and we'll keep listening to this as we go along.
I hate
here.
to say this. I'm kind of ashamed to say this. I used to like Nick Fuentes because he went so hard on two particular people, Charlie Kirk and Eye Patch McCain, and he really got them to sweat. Which I'm like, okay, but the more I learn about him, the more I'm like, I don't care for this guy. I don't care for him or John Doyle.
So this is what I'll say about Fuentes here, and I'm gonna
Because I kind of
pause
don't
this for a
like
second.
TP USA. I don't like, especially now that the Mises Caucus took over. I don't like TP USA that much. Even I like some people in it. I'm not crazy about PragerU or the Daily Wire because it seems Conservative Inc. is like, oh my God, the left. The left's getting so powerful. Libertarians are like, let's dismantle their institutions. They're like, oh, you crazy libertarians, you could never ever win. You're stupid. This. Will you debate us? No, but you're dumb. The left's crazy. Okay, fine. I'm almost like, you know what? It's kind of like someone who's getting eaten alive by a tiger. They're like, don't help me. I'm like, this tiger keep getting bigger and going to eat you. Like, don't help me. You guys are stupid. You don't have an idea. I'm like, okay, let him get eaten.
Yeah. Well, I view it somewhat as the same. I've talked on a few occasions here about the specifically on TikTok, surprisingly, where I just made some short videos to see, kind of test out the algorithms over there. I was just curious to see what the views got. But I covered the Kanye announcing thing and announce the fact that he was getting help from Fuentes and Milo Yiannopoulos. So I want to talk a little bit about this. So I separate the three entities into three different groups. This is Kanye, who had prior public statements about Jews and things like that got him in the media a few months ago. He goes on Lex Friedman. He's already in the media for that, right?
Yes.
Milo Yiannopoulos and Nick Fuentes come after the fact. They glommed on to him because of his name and because of the fact he wanted to run for president. Tim Pool is a normal media person who put in an interview request. My assumption is that interview request was put through Milo because Milo was just on his show. So Tim Pool got them there most likely because of Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo Yiannopoulos is only in connection with Kanye because of his media kind of attention, and especially with his connection with Fuentes. I imagine that's who got Fuentes involved, because I think the chain of custody goes Kanye met with Milo, then met with Fuentes.
Probably.
So that being said, I do not like Fuentes, and I do not like Milo Yiannopoulos, and I will straight up explain why here. But I wanna start by
I don't like them either.
prefacing it by this. Milo is the ultimate grifter. I call him the Bible salesman in all of my Twitter posts and things, and people say, what do I mean by that? It has nothing to do with anything anti-religious. It has to do with the attitude that he carries.
Let me ask this. He used to really push as a branding tactic. In 2016, I'm a gay conservative. I'm a gay almost.
No, let me explain.
Can I?
So Milo Yiannopoulos is a right-wing plant in the sense that he only became famous in the first place because a bunch of people in the right-wing movement and the right side of politics invested in his character. He's a farce.
That's
he
the
was
character he
created.
played. It's kind of like me saying, it's kind of like me hitting up the Koch brothers and be like, yo, I'm an
No, you know who it's exactly like? It's exactly like David Hogg or any
David
of the
Hogg.
other left-wing characters who play a role that it's a personality they need to play because they have backers that are paying them huge sums of money,
So
millions of fucking dollars.
My question, so
For him, it was Breitbart. That was he was getting
Breitbart,
funded
yes.
by Breitbart early on, and then he was funded by, which by the way, he wasn't funded by Breitbart. He was funded by specifically two high up Republican elites that were paying him directly. There's been tons of coverage on this on YouTube. There's been we're not talking about just small channels. We're not talking about left wingers who are calling him out for this. There were plenty of Republicans at the time who did this. Jack Murphy, who got supplanted because a bunch of shit came out about him getting fucked in the ass and liking dildos and all this shit, right?
Yeah,
that guy was a Republican plant. His entire career was bought and paid for. His book that he wrote, which is all about him coming from the right to the left, right? That book only exists because he stole money, allegedly, from a school that he was working at. And then a bunch of right-wingers didn't really realize that. They just saw this book that he wrote to make money and get notoriety that says, oh, I went from the left to the debaucherous left to the Republican right, and now I'm a conservative and all this stuff. That's why Tim Pool started taking attention to him in the first place.
So I wanted to tie a couple things here that are in the news. And I'm going to be careful. I'm going to really be careful with this one. So, yeah, here's my understanding of Milo. He played the character of a gay conservative. That's what I saw. He was playing a character. I wasn't sure if he really was or not, but he really emphasized that.
A gay Christian conservative.
A great Christian.
The Christian part is important.
Okay. But here, let me finish. Great gay Christian conservative. Played that part. Did it pretty well. Got a lot of media attention. Got on Bill Maher. Got on everything. Even Trump elected, he pushed that, and then until a story came out with a priest, you can connect the dots. I'm not going to have to go into it, but it's pretty much a priest kicking it Balenciaga style. I guess that's the best way I could say it. If you want to discuss that story as well, we can if we're careful. But then he kind of fell off the face of the earth, I guess, because he
talked about it on Rogan, and the same people on the right who were investing into him distanced themselves almost immediately, which made him a target, like an open target from all these media conglomerates. So he didn't just get canceled from CNN and the left. He got canceled from all of the right-wing publications too, and everybody just piled on because the green light was put out that we're not working with this guy anymore.
Yeah, so it seemed like that kind of like, I'm like, oh, cool. This guy's kind of annoying. Sometimes he was funny with his joke, but he's kind of annoying. Like,
but at the end of the day, he's an anamorph. He can just take whatever political shape he needs to get paid.
I was thinking he got yerked. If we're gonna use the terminology, like, okay, he's been thrown to the pool of acid. This clown is gone. Like, please, like, to me, people are like, don't you think it's funny he made fun of Leslie Jones? I'm like, I don't care. I don't care if, Trump makes fun of Rachel Maddow or Nick. I don't care. Just end taxes. Warn people about medical procedures that are bad. And the wars in Yemen and everything. Defund the whole federal government. Call it a day. I don't care if. Then whatever. Then I can, worry about who made fun of who.
I think this is so.
Then he resurfaces all of a sudden after that accusation on Tim Pool's show, and he's just, for one, wearing sunglasses and saying ridiculous things to me. Some of it, fine, can make sense, but to me, he's a grifter. To me, Nick Fuentes and John Doyle are grifters. I don't think anybody who supports Trump now is really being serious. And I'm not a fan of them. Not really a fan of Kanye West really at all either, because all of this stuff is wrong. All of this stuff is fundamentally wrong. The religion that rules the world is called dark Luciferianism, and they're people who want to put you into a satanic mindset, so you just consume, control, die, consume, control. Literally.
I think honestly the best way to explain it, and I've done this in the past because my opinions on religion are something I haven't really explored as much as others have recently, is something I'm going to be doing some shows on in the future, but I refer to it as everybody wants everybody to be doing debaucherous things. Whether it's
not just debaucherous.
Okay, so what I mean by this is whether or not you believe in some political or religious entity that is bigger than you, because some people don't. Some people think the government is made up of people, and some people think that I know those people are stupid, but it is what it is. And some people think within the religious space that there's all these other religions that are competing with each other, and it's just an equal playing field, and it is what it is. The truth is that you have all of the religions in the world, all of the theological thought movements in the world have been altered in a sense by the way that everything else works around them. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I see it is we're just in general moving in a space where there seems to be some very powerful movements, especially in the West, that are pushing for debaucherous activity.
Satanism.
Things like, well, right. Well, the reason I use a word like debaucherous rather than Satanism or satanic is because there's always going to be a huge chunk of the population who doesn't prescribe what you're saying with any reality. Okay. There's a group of people who don't view Satan as a person. They don't view it as a reality.
I don't either. I don't view it. Okay. To be fair,
Satan brings debauchery. He brings depravity, right?
Okay. Here's the thing. I beat Diablo with a necromancer. I don't believe in a dude with horns running around. I don't even believe in Lucifer in that context. What I believe is this. You have different brains. You have a higher brain, a million brain than this. You have a reptile brain. These elites or whatever have studied enough psychology, and Mark Passio talks about this. I'm going to tag Justin Padini. Essentially, here's this. The people who control the world understand how to put people in fear and duress and all these emotions and tie them down to the material world, consume it, die, like in They Live. Essentially what they do is they use ancient psychology, which is their media, their propaganda tools, and essentially get you in the reptile brain. Everything's fight or flight. Oh my God, COVID's going to get me. Oh my God, there's scary people from the Middle East. Oh my God, this and this. Oh my God, the economy. So they have you in a state of fear all the time. That to me is Satanism. It's not an entity per se, although I don't disbelieve in demons or anything or negative entities. I do, but ultimately it's getting people rooted in the material world. There's no objective truth. There's just consume, die, consume, die. How do I know that? I had friends when I was a punk rocker getting into anarchism. They went the LaVey route, and I said, what is wrong with you? And they said, I'm joining this, I'm rebelling. I'm like, okay, what are you guys doing? Like, you worshiping this dude? They're like, no, we're essentially worshiping the self, the just control, indulge this, like, kind of just
right. So if you understand like Marxist philosophy, which is uprooted in a lot of the leftist doctrine that has taken over the political sphere today, is rooted in a lot of those ideas around kind of encroaching Satanist beliefs and things along those lines. But I think something that I point out in particular is that what I am referring to is not just a singular movement. I'm referring to a shift that's happening within the Catholic faith, within the Muslim faith, within the Jewish faith, within the agnostics, within the atheists, within everyone that is pushing them more towards debauchery, more towards evil acts. I don't necessarily assign that as Satanistic because I think there's a huge position that will take that that's not Satanism because Satan isn't real, because that isn't a real thing you can explain, because there's all these other books that explain Satan in a different light or a different way, right? Just like an anarchist will bicker with another anarchist about what is a real anarchist, right?
Yeah.
So
the difference
I
is,
remove that from the equation entirely by saying I'm not prescribing this figure or an action that figure brings or an aura that's around them. I'm just saying the world seems to be moving much like the Romans did in a shitty direction where everybody treats people like shit, treats them like material objects, breaks down society into a bunch of text messages and fucking emojis, and breaks down the socio-political and just social aspect of life into this degrading hate storm of shit that no one wants to be involved in.
Yeah, you're correct.
Right.
Well, can I bring up the other news story then? Or
Go ahead. What do you want to cover?
All right. So okay. So she has a Russian name. It's the main designer for Balenciaga, I think, is Yola Kavolta or something. And I did a little digging, and essentially what the Balenciaga did was, they did these very suggestive ads with kids. And I was like, okay, this is part of really like something that's more nefarious deep down. This isn't, and then they apologize. They're like, man, I felt kind of like one of these government apologies. I'm sorry we droned Afghanistan. My bad. We'll try harder later. Collateral damage happens. Hey, I hope. So that was kind of, and they put out this letter saying they're sorry. But then I started looking into like, okay, who's the main designer? Who's the main people? Who's kind of like behind this? And a lot of her, and I'm not going to show the images here. You can look at them if you'd like, if you really want to. If you want to stomach it, it's definitely not something that is PG-13 or it's definitely R-rated. But you see her with a lot of figurines, like
so
kids.
I'll give my because I looked into this from a more analytical view, and I came to the conclusion of what has happened here is this is a contracted photographer through Balenciaga and they've had multiple other contracts with this artist and other artists with the same management group. So what I think has gone on here is this went viral because this is what this photographer does. All of her work has this weird kind of tinge to it. And then Balenciaga freaked out because everybody started pulling up old tweets and old photo stuff from Instagram that was from these other designers from this same management group that all had similar styles to them, kind of talking about children and putting them in a certain light. I don't know if it's this, okay, I'll say this. I don't know if it's nefarious because Balenciaga themselves as was doing this. I think it's more likely that there's a bunch of photographers who get work very easily because of the way that the leftist hiring machine works. And so you're going to have a lot more photographers in that field who are politically on that side of the fence, who are going to be into this weird fucking occult bullshit because they're already these creative heads anyway. So I think you end up with the situation where, yeah, Balenciaga should not have fucking paid these photographers to do this stuff. They shouldn't have bought the work. They sure shouldn't have used it as an ad campaign. But at the same time, I don't think Balenciaga was necessarily nefariously doing it. I think it's just a thing where you've got a bunch of fucking businessmen who are like, yeah, pay that photographer to post on social media. And that's just kind of how it works. I mean, how much of these ad campaigns and stuff do you think the executives in the company are actually detailing themselves? Or how much of that is just getting passed off to a director of some department who then passes it off to a couple more departments who direct?
This is a big fashion brand. They have a lot of power. How many of those executives do you think engage in something ritualistic? See, the interesting thing to me.
So that's a good question. I think there's probably some of that for sure, but I don't necessarily think. Okay.
Can we just go on an Alex Jones rant? They're all demons. They're all possessed.
Yeah, this is the slip to depravity that I'm talking about before. Is I do think, to a certain degree, that's what this is, right? They want everybody to be moving towards this stuff anyway. It makes Balenciaga more money, and at the end of the day, because they can cut more clothing out of their fucking shit, less fabric for them to produce. All these other things you could draw out of that in a kind of conspiratorial lane. But what I'll say is this: I think what you have here is a company that is on a corporate level making corporate decisions because they are a massive brand. They control a big portion of the fashion industry. I think you've got a bunch of nitwits huddled around who make executive decisions on how to grow their brand or get things or young people to pay attention to them, right? You've got the Roe v. Wade thing, which is being talked about by all these young people who are involved in the fashion industry. So they're targeting them by including this Supreme Court case from 2008 and all this weird shit, right? It's like the protect the kids motif is literally what they're going with that court case. And then they frame up all these kids and stuff in the S&M bear and all that bullshit, right? It's to make people look into the details of the photo. It was successful. The brand, it was successful in getting people to pay attention to the marketing fucking campaign that they ran. The backfire was the fact that they had a catalog of other shit that they had done that was then brought out of the works because
it didn't backfire. Here's the thing that I understand from dark occultists.
Well, they deleted their Instagram and Twitter, so I think that's a backfire.
Maybe, because here's the thing: if they're gonna have to do, there's part of their I don't follow their religion. I don't follow mainstream religion. I do my own thing. Which is somewhere in between Neville Goddard and Manly P. Hall and Sufism and all that. And I guess my stuff is weird too. I just don't hurt anybody or do any of this weird ritualistic stuff. But
I'm not a fan of organized religion.
Neither am I. At all. not down with the Talmud, not down with Wahhabism, not down either with with mainstream Christianity or Catholicism or any of that. What I will say is, in their religion, they have to tell you they're going to do something bad before they do it. I don't know why it's kind of a rule, but not tell you as in like, hi, here's an email. Yeah, we're going to lock you down and enforce the town. They do it kind of through symbolism. And to their knowledge, if you don't get the symbolism or you're too stupid to see it or they pull it away, they're like, here's a symbol. We're going to do it.
Oh,
I don't know what that means. Like, I
for
told
the
them.
record, it's like that in a lot of religions. It's just not implied in the same way. I mean, for instance, in the Talmud, with the Torah and stuff, you have this position of you cannot be deceitful, right? Well, what is deceit, right? Like, because I can get around that rule in about 1,000 different ways indirectly. So it becomes this thing where it's not implied, but they're kind of telling you can get around this rule if you need to by telling somebody that you're going to do the bad thing before you do the bad thing, right? Because it's not if it's not deceitful if I tell you I'm going to hit you over the head and then I do hit you over the head, right? It's the opposite of deceit. I was open in the air with it.
Yeah, I mean, like, to me, it just they're all criminals. Like, even I don't know if you saw this story, but the nuclear
I mean, let me be honest. I'm not
dude.
justifying. I don't want to appear like I'm justifying the victimization of any kids that were done through the acting process with the photos being taken and that whole thing and any kind of scarring that took place. But the fact is like, I don't view kids taking photos with the teddy bear with leather straps on it to be the worst thing in the world. Same thing with a bunch of clips with baby dolls and weird shit like that. I know a lot of weird photographers, and I've known a lot of weird sculptists and artists throughout my time coming from Seward, because we're like a tourist town. A lot of artists come here to sell their shit. A lot of weird stuff. There's a lot of weird people who take very weird photos who are into weird stuff.
And I get that. And
as long as you're not dipping into the range of like literally taking photos of naked kids or kids in thongs and shit like that, which is what like the cuties angle or something like that, right? Like that's not what this is. Everybody is saying the sexualization of kids is coming from this, and I'm going, okay, well, why? Well, it's because they took a photo of a teddy bear wearing an S&M outfit. Okay, well, how is that any different from what you might do if you were out and about with your, say, 10, 12, 13-year-old kid, if you're joking around, making an inside joke to the other parent that you're with, right? Because they make an innuendo or they do something that they don't realize they're doing because they're a kid, right? How actually damaging is that in the scale of what we're fucking dealing with when you're talking about kids getting blown up in other countries, people starving because they're getting frozen out in Ukraine, economy's about to collapse, people coming across the fucking border.
I'm looking forward to that.
Like, you've got all this shit going on, and everybody's going, the Balenciaga is taking photos of teddy bears, and they've got leather straps on. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. This is kind of a stupid argument to have.
I guess my argument is not that. My argument is this. Look, there are psychopaths who are in charge of you. This is some of what they do. If you look deeper into Balenciaga, that uncovers it. So drop your minarchism, drop your classical liberalism, drop your conservatism, drop your leftism. Just go anarchy. I don't care if you're an anarcho-capitalist, but like find a school. I don't care if you go full anarcho-primitivist and live out in the woods. And you're like, I'm done. Some days I want to do that.
I'll say this. Eventually, people are going to have to come to the conclusion that I came to a long time ago. And the reason why I still prescribe myself as an ANCAP and not a more diet form of the tribes, which is the fact that
it's a diet form.
I would say that if you're a member of an anarchist group that believes that capitalism cannot exist under anarchism, then I think you're the opposite of an anarchist.
Well, to be fair, here's what I said. I can show you the thread actually. There's a guy he was explaining stuff from like Malatesta and Rudolph Rocker and Bakunin, and I read those guys. I'm like, okay. And then they said they don't like capitalism and they don't consider. Here's the other thing: they didn't say we wanted to destroy capitalism. They said we don't consider ANCAPs anarchists. And I explained here's why. I consider myself as an anarchist, as an ANCAP. So they didn't say they wanted to kill me or destroy capitalism. It's better. It's not great, but like a lot of ANCOMs and syndicalists will say, we don't consider you anarchists. Sometimes I said I don't consider them anarchists. But here's the funny thing. If the state's gone tomorrow, probably what would happen is I would sit down and be like, look, you don't think I'm an anarchist or I do anarchy, right? I don't think you do. I don't want your version of anarchism. So let me try my experiment here. Let me try your experiment here.
So here's the problem. The problem with the way that I view your equation, and I think you're correct in the sense that that's what I want, that's what you want, that's what most people want. That's not really what they want. And they might say that, but the tenets of their beliefs, what that actually comes down to is not that. Because if you are, it doesn't matter. If you're an anarchist who's coming from the perspective of wanting to destroy capitalism, the only thing that you can do to cause that is to disrupt markets that you have no right to disrupt within an anarchist society. They can, and they will.
Well, here's the problem. There's three problems with that. And I even told them that, and I can't rebuttal this. Let's just face it. The ratio of ANCAPs to ANCOMs, they said I don't exist. I'm like, here's all of the ANCOMs. There's a ton of ANCOMs.
I know you're missing my point, kind of though, and I want to make sure that I I explain this correctly.
Even if fine, let's say we're outnumbered. The way Rudolph Rocker's direct democracy works is you have to have horizontal or direct democracy.
Right. Okay. Listen, Listen, I'm not going a theological route. I'm not going to bring up names. I'm not going to talk about people. I'm going to say this. Right. You've got an island with 100 people on it, right? And let's say 95 of those people are ANCAP libertarian anarchists who are going to live in society and trade equally, and it's all hunky-dory, right? Mm-hmm. Okay? 5 of those people are ANCOMs. Okay. And their position is that they want to destroy capitalism. They want to remove the free market and seize the means of production and free it under their philosophy. That is what they believe. I don't care where you come from that philosophy. That's the tenets of it. I've read the books. The fact is, those guys will do everything in their power to disrupt the market of the other 95 people, to destroy capitalism under their beliefs. And that action in itself, what they will have to do to affect that market, is disrupting natural law. It's disrupting the tenets of private property. It will have to disrupt any natural market that is formed. And it is inherently, in my opinion, anti-anarchist and anti-capitalist. It's against, to me, that is against whatever tenets of anarchism you can believe in.
Okay, some anarchists like Antifa type say that. I have not found anywhere where Bakunin said, I can be wrong, anywhere where Bakunin or Kropotkin said, go and dismantle what he would call anarcho-capitalists. I've seen him say,
listen, this is the problem. This is the problem with what you're trying to do, because you're trying to prescribe the beliefs of people who are living right now, who are online right now, to people who wrote some books forever ago. And the fact is, those people will claim to believe those beliefs all they fucking want, and it doesn't matter, because they have their own tenets of beliefs that they've built on top of that, which include the things like what Antifa does in the street when they beat people up and steal their shit. And it includes what a lot of the ANCOMs think, which is they should have your shit whether you like it or not. And at the end of the day, they don't care whether or not the philosophy signs off on what they believe, because they've changed what the philosophy is. In the same way that if Mises existed today, this is a point Amash made, and I think he was correct in a way, right? If Mises was alive today, he might not agree entirely with what the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Movement has become or is doing. Fine. Who fucking gives a shit? Like, I'm tired of pretending like that's our litmus test. Our litmus test is trying to fix the fucking world that we're dealing with. Our litmus test is getting the government out of people's lives. That is going to be done not through bickering about theology and who was right 100 fucking years ago. It's going to be done by debating those issues now and how they're reacting within the political sphere now. And the way I see it is those ANCOMs, the people who claim to be anarchists, but at the end of the day, they want to take things from people. They want the right to take ownership over other people's stuff. They want the rights to come in and say, well, you're doing something voluntarily, but I don't agree with what you're doing voluntarily, so I should have the right to take something from you or force you to do something else.
In my experience, okay, forget the people who wrote the books. In my experience, people on the genuine libertarian left, Brett Weinstein, former punks, which I came from, old school hippies, and even some ANCOMs outside Antifa, don't think like that. They have a different way of thinking. Obviously, they're different societal structures. I do hear some people say tear capitalism down, but I think through mutualism and an understanding of that, we could maybe work together.
I think mutualism works great if people are willing to adapt to it and do it. But I think that also, much like Israel and Palestine, has turned out to be a shit show when you have so many fractionalized groups of people with different ways of thinking trying to come together in some form of cohesiveness. I don't think it's as easy as people think. And I think you're going to end up with a situation where by trying to apply a one-size-fits-all notion to that, you're going to end up causing so many civil wars that nobody's fucking left.
I'm not going to do the one-size-fits-all. I guess what I'm saying is this. I took a long journey to get where I'm at, from a punk rocker to a Ron Paul guy to an ANCAP from Kokesh, and then in the Mises Caucus. Then I was in the Mises Caucus. I started bringing people in. One of my friends brought in somebody to my podcast. He talked about Jeremiah Harding, if you know him, and he started talking about Anarcho Coalition. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want anything to do with any of it. I was actually defending Fuentes at the time. Like, yeah, isn't he kind of funny? And then,
I mean, I'll defend Fuentes on a lot of things.
Then after a while, I found out some of his, going to find baby batter in places. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with this dude. And then what happened is Jeremy started to show me like different things. I looked into anarcho-primitivism, and much to a lot of people in the Mises Caucus dismay, I'm like, you know what? I don't really feel like I want to work. Not that like MAGA people are bad. I'd rather convince the MAGA people of ANCAP stand. I'd rather talk to mutualists, syndicalists, primitivists, and transhumanists, if I can find one, anarcho-feminists, if they don't are crazy pacifists and individualists, and see if I guess the impossible task I'd like to see is ANCAP, ANCOM unity. Why not? Why?
I would love to have some of them on to talk about the theology of it, but it's something I looked into when I was coming into the LP stuff back in 2018-19, and the position that I've taken on the stuff has been, I'm sure there are great individual people within those philosophies and theologies throughout the history of the LP, throughout the history of a lot of the other stuff. But the fact is if the movement they're prescribing to at this point in modern history is prescribing to something I view as against what anarchism prescribes, then I don't view them as being the same as, say, somebody who says, hey, cohesion is the ultimate end goal. Well, you can't really have cohesion as the ultimate end goal if you want to take a market from some other people. And I don't see an ANCOM situation ever being able to exist without that being the case. And I think that what you'll find is that not all, but a good amount, and some of these people do believe in Marxist philosophies. They do believe in a lot of the tenets of those groups. And because of that, you'll find that a lot of them have a tendency, if they got power or any semblance of it, with any kind of, movement behind them, they would immediately change their tune more to the calm part of the ANCOM name and attempt to take more. And I think that's what I've seen on occasion with bigger social media personalities who grew in the movement and eventually got to a certain size, and then, okay, well, now I'm a full-blown communist. And it's like, okay, well, whatever.
Okay, fine.
I
But
think
I
it's
have
something that,
friends. I do have okay. I'm not. I guess I'm defending them a little bit. I see people in the ANCOM community and minarchist community. Sometimes when they get frustrated, and I do too, we'll make Pinochet memes, and I'm not in that. But like sometimes, my boy, some of my boys, one time. I forget who posted this, but they had a Ron Paul laughing. It's like when you get tired of communists, it just had a Ron Paul laughing, and it turns like faded into Pinochet. So we can go a pretty bad route too. Like there
okay,
are
let me ask this. What do you think is more likely? An ANCOM moves more to be anarchist, or an ANCAP moves more to be ANCOM?
ANCAP moves more to be anarchist.
Well, no. That's not what I asked, though. Is it more likely that an ANCAP like myself would turn into an anarcho-communist? Or is it more likely that an anarcho-communist would turn into an anarchist?
It depends on. Here's the hard part. It depends on the person, but if I'm being objective, it's probably the second one.
Right. And I would agree with you. But if you're correct about that, then what's going to happen is the second you try to have cohesion between a group like ANCAPs and ANCOMs, is eventually the minority of ANCOMs is going to be so small that the only way they're going to reach the vision that they have is by lashing out at the other 95 people on the island.
No. Okay, here's my main argument to all this, because I sat down with Jeremy and I really thought about it and said, okay, let's say we defeat, here's the hard part. Let's say we defeat, the World Economic Forum and all that, which most people I see really want to do anyway. They don't like these people. Globalists are gone. I even made the argument that nationalism ain't working too great, because I know people in Texas who say, man, I'd rather have people from Mexico, provided there's not like an influx like a crazy one,
Right.
than people from California. I hear that all the time. Imagine, and I know why, because people in California, yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
So I think and David Friedman, I think, is right when he said the United States was too big back in the day. I said, I think he's right. And people are like, no. And now I even get like mild, chill conservatives. They're like, try a peaceful divorce. I guess we could do it. We'll think about it. Marjorie Taylor Greene even suggested. So here's the thing. You get rid of the globalists. You get rid of most nationalist structures, which I see a peaceful divorce in the future. You get down to a very local community level. And you're getting very close, and you get to a minarchist state or an anarcho-capitalist state. I know people personally who do not like capitalism, no matter what you do, no matter what's going to happen. So once you get to ANCAP stand, there's going to be people who say, I don't like Murray Rothbard, I don't like capitalism. And you have the right to do that voluntarily. You don't have to accept the philosophy. So what do? I looked, and then I said, okay, fine. In a decentralized society, what philosophies exist? Capitalism does. There could be other forms of decentralization, but the main ones I found were anarcho-capitalism, anarcho-primitivism, which is people just say, I have friends who say they hate society. They hate capitalism. They hate put me in, let me go into a little tribe. Okay. But there's still people who want to unionize and things like that. So there are ANCOMs. What I picture is like you have your city councils here. This is the main city. Then off to the side, like you have your Benedictine monks, you have your Amish, you have your people. They're doing their anarchist thing. You have direct democracies and syndicalists who are, maybe they cuss us out. They don't like us, but we still work together with the syndicalist communes. And you have your ANCOM farms here and your hippie farms here. And yeah. And then some transhumanists and pacifists running around, and we cool.
I'm fine if that can exist. I just don't. Some of those groups I see as more willing to take things from other people as others.
Am I going too utopian?
I think it is, yeah. But I think it's something a lot of ANCAPs run into a problem explaining. because they get into this philosophy of utopianism, I think, often, the Ancapistan kind of thing. But I think there's a point to be made that these things can exist in the real world, but you're never going to get them on that grand of a scale. And the only way that they can realistically exist within the modern world that we have now is by taking them with some form of force. And I know that sounds scary to people, and they hear that and they go, well, what do you mean? Well, what I mean by that is, at this point, the federal government owns all the land, and the states own all the land. Correct. And the private citizens own very fucking little. Yeah. So if you want to create these communities, right, away from any of the infrastructure, away from this stuff, eventually it is going to get to a point where the private lands that are owned by private citizens are all having to rent out those properties, lease them out, or live on them, which means there will not be land left for people to buy. Okay? What that means is the only way that you're going to get any of the things that we're talking about in this utopian vision is if you take them. That's the reality.
No, not necessarily.
Well, okay, so explain to me this. If all the biggest banks in the world right now in the United States have leases and own all the property within all the cities and rural areas in the United States, the federal government owns all the rest through the park services and everything else. And then the states mop up the remaining portions of land that they only give out on a very first come, first served basis to the highest bidders, which is exactly how it works right now in every small town or city you go to in the United States. And then you have central planners on top of that. You have the government infrastructure built on there, right? Okay, now imagine this. Market crashes. Okay? Woo! Or market's doing amazing. Woo! In either one of those situations, the government knows that there's a finite amount of land that exists that everybody can live on. There's a finite amount of land that can be farmed, that you can get food off of and actually turn into agricultural wealth. And there's a finite number of land that's used for resources, things like oil, gold, minerals, right? Those kind of things, water. Everything else is off limits. It's owned by somebody. You can't touch it. It's not yours. So the only way you're going to get use of any of that open land once the stuff is gone is going to be by taking it. They're not going to hand that out for free to a bunch of people who want to go live like hippies in the woods. That's not going to happen.
I don't think so.
So at some point, those groups, no matter who you are going to have to put down your fucking shovels and understand that you're going to have to take action to obtain the quote-unquote utopia that anybody wants at the end of the day. So it's one of those things where are groups outside of ANCAPs or certain right-leaning conservatives in the libertarian side of things or the even middle-of-the-road libertarians, I feel like they're much more prepared to do things like that than anybody with the word communist or primitive assigned to them. I don't think those people are going to be prepared to deal with those realities. And I don't think they're prepared now to deal with those realities. Because I think the fact that, well, okay, you want to go build a farm. You want to go build a homestead. Good luck. You better have a bunch of money saved up. You better already have a retirement fund. You better have a way to pay the taxes every fucking year. Mm-hmm. Because if not, the state's going to take your shit anyway. And then all the shit that you worked for, all the work that you just did to build up that so-called farm or so-called homestead is fucking worthless at the end of the day. Some people have the ability to do this shit, but the vast majority of the populace just doesn't. They can't go build a fucking cabin and live in the woods. Like, I live in a state where people do that all the time. They died. Like, you know.
So, that's why you got to direct them to my homeboy who I made the podcast with, the first ever an anarcho-capitalist sat down with a premise, and that is, hey, John Zerzan, help not as a leader, but as a thought leader, he's not bad. And he's the one who's running on emptiness and things like that. Of course, people think I'm nuts.
No, I mean, I get the idea behind of it. I mean, you explained it the day you came on after doing that interview, and I think that you made a good argument for and again, for why somebody would see this as being a reality. I just don't see it working in any sort of modern sense. If this was 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, I think you could do that no problem. But the reality now is that 99% of the world we live on is owned by the people you're attempting to fight against.
So here's what I say. Here's what I'm saying. I'll even play a clip to back up what I'm saying. I don't know how everything will work because I'm not a central planner. The hard part with me is, and I'll even say this. Maybe my ideas are utopian as Klaus Schwab's, even though they're the direct opposite of his. Maybe they're as utopian as his.
Right.
The thing is, I'm not a central planner. I believe in spontaneous order, so I don't know how things will work. But to me, the peaceful divorce is the first step. Then you get local entities to say, hey, I'm breaking off. That way you don't have to fight. You don't have to kill anybody. You don't have to bash anyone's head with a shovel. We can do it peacefully. We don't need a revolutionary war. We do it civilly. Hey, man, that's what I'm all about. Then I start bringing up these philosophies. I'm like, okay, cool. Now that we broke off, what are we going to do? All right. I got some anatomy of the state books here. I got some anarchism in the state. We got some, running on emptiness. I got, hopefully I can make friends with some syndicalists. I'm trying. They're nice. They talk to me. They don't agree with but that's kind of my idea, is get these people to not like each other, but at least work together in some sense. I don't know how it's all going to work. I look at Mises Caucus. I look at the C4SS, if you know them, the Center for a Stateless Society, and these left libertarian think tanks, and try and think, how can cohesion work between ANCAPs and ANCOMs? And I get a lot of, and there's a lot of people that do not like that either, because it's not necessarily their thing. Sorry, I feel bad because I got off the yay subject.
It's fine. I think we covered that now.
Okay, but here's what kind of inspired me, along with Jeremiah, to kind of look at things in a different path. I'm not lefty, but I am more of a left-wing ANCAP, I guess, other than immigration.
The question of socialism, I think if I understood the question correctly, how could we effectively make a socialist program viable, which is a greater obstacle to it, white supremacy or the Democratic Party? I thought that was kind of a cool way of putting it. But I want to level a challenge back, a thought experiment. For all those who have some sort of sympathy with the ideals expressed by socialists, I want you to think for a moment, what would happen if they simply faced no opposition of any kind and were capable of instituting the policies that they favor? Do you think it would work? Now, of course it would work. Well, I have to say I'm ever less convinced that it would. Now, I also think that if we did the experiment on the other side of the spectrum, if we handed power over to economic libertarians and we allowed them to deregulate anything, do you think it would work? No. Absolutely not. So my point is actually this one. If you're familiar, I want to be cautious about the political compass test itself. This is an online test that allows you to diagnose yourself in a 4-quadrant model. I don't know how good the questions are at actually placing people on it, but I do think that the diagram that has 2 axes, a left-right axis on the X and authoritarian versus libertarian on the Y-axis, is actually a very useful way of looking at things. And my point would be that the 2 libertarian quadrants, libertarian left, where I am, and libertarian right, where the economic libertarians are, those 2 quadrants, once they recognize that nobody in those quadrants actually knows the description of the system that we should be building, have tremendous reason to unite, because actually we are agreed about values. We are agreed about the fundamental importance of liberty, and now what we need to do is have a discussion about how practical interventions might be and what those interventions we might propose would be in light of what we now know that those who architected the ideas behind socialism didn't know. So I would say, not to make it too black and white, but the enemy of those who hold liberty as a great value are the authoritarians. And the two authoritarian quadrants are actually not united. They don't like each other, and for good reason. So there is great advantage in putting our differences aside in those two libertarian quadrants and recognizing that the differences we have are about policy and that none of us have the right answers on that front. Thank you.
Does it? I don't know if you
So
heard
I'd
that.
agree with him. I would agree with him to an extent. I disagree with him. I disagree with one thing in particular, which is the fact that for him to say one side of the spectrum on one angle wouldn't work because of degrees it does versus one angle that wouldn't work either. I disagree with him that the free market side wouldn't work. And I think that was Mises's point as well. And I think that if you take what he's saying at face value, it's true. But I don't think that either one of those groups in seclusion would be willing to work cohesively in the way that they let on. I'm not saying simply that communists are deceitful and they'll try to fuck people over. I mean, I think that's true. But I also think that ANCAPs are...
Not ANCOMs, right?
I'm sure they will too. But I also think that ANCAPs will attempt to do somewhat of the same thing. I mean, it's not like they're not going to attempt to lock communists completely out of any kind of market persuasion. They're not going to push them out of any kind of space that they could use to compete against capitalism, because they have an incentive to keep them out of those things because they're saying they want to destroy it. So it's sort of a catch-22 where both parties, much like I mentioned with the Israel-Palestine annotation earlier, it's very similar in the sense where it's not just two factions fighting against each other. It's two factions that so inherently disagree with each other that they will never agree. And the people within each of those individual groups make up hundreds of other little groups.
Okay.
And so they all have their other individual disagreements.
Okay. Oh, fine. Let me address that. Let me address some things. One, I think cohesion would be possible.
I don't know who Watchman State is in the chat.
That's my boy Eli. He was I was at his house. He has some really cool old school video games. He does game nights. He's a minarchist.
Okay.
Very nice guy. We're hanging out at his house at Reno. Very friendly. What's up, Eli? He doesn't believe in full decentralization. He still believes in the night Watchman State. Hence the name Watchman
Right. Well, you can have that under an ANCAP state, right? I mean, that can exist. Fine.
Yeah,
what I'm stating is...
But no, I was just stating his. But
Right.
I'll just make the point here real quick is this. I've talked to several Jews, and because, my dad was real big and my grandfather was real big, I talked to several Jews and Arabs, and I've heard a lot. And I've actually come to and people in Lebanon and things like that. Here's why I actually came to the conclusion, because people used to just take the hard line. Oh, Palestine's always right, Hamas is always right, or Israel's always right, the Knesset's always right, Benjamin. And I actually said this.
I take the position that Palestine is mostly right within military actions that they take
I
because they're on their land.
Yeah, I understand why Palestine's doing it, because land was stolen. But where we're at now, here's what I say, is that, and most people I've talked to, even the hardcore Zionists and the hardcore Palestine people would say this. Most people in Palestine and Israel and most hardcore Lebanese, and I know this for a fact, would trade and work with Zionists, even though they wouldn't like them. I'm not saying they'd be buddies. It'd be kind of like a Chinese, Japanese, French, British. I don't know if the French and British hate each other. Russian, Ukrainian thing, like there'd still be social cooperation, not friendly, not like buddy cooperation. But if you got Hamas and the Knesset out of the way, I think Palestinians and Jews could and Israelis could do business. I really think they could if you got the state out of the way and said, you guys interact. I'm not saying it'll all be hunky-dory and peaceful.
Yeah, so I don't disagree. If the state was abolished on both sides,
yes,
I believe that you would have much more cohesion than you have now.
Right.
But off
And
of
that's
the
what
religious tenuance of both sides, that piece is only going to be marginal in comparison to what they had. Both of those sides are never going to cohesively exist under the same state. And even in the equation you
They
just
could
gave,
in the same region.
I
I
don't think, but again, they're not going to exist under the same laws. They're not going to exist under the same rulers. They're never going to exist under the same government.
To be fair, before okay, you got like the propagation of Zionism by the state and the propagation of whatever Hamas is doing. I'm not saying it'd be perfect, but I'm saying they could coexist somewhat in a region, and we don't know exactly what that will look like. Same thing, we don't know what ANCAP and ANCOM stand would look like. But if there's no monopoly on force, it might lend itself to say, hey, we're on an island. Since we're on the island and resources are finite, I think this about you. You think this. You think abortion is murder. I think this. I think capitalism's evil. You don't. I think Bakunin's good or bad. You don't. I think you think Rothbard's a nut. You don't. You think I'm a crazy capitalist. You think I've been called a feudalist actually, and the biggest thing is, once
But what you're doing, prescribing all these labels, to other people like that, is you're just becoming the state.
No, but they prescribed the labels to me. I went in the syndicalist chat and said,
No, but I'm talking about, like, okay, say you have an ANCAP or ANCAPistan society or whatever, and you have a bunch of people living under it. You have to cease with branding people with these political diatribes, because the fact is that if there is no political competition happening in the same way, then that ceases to need to exist. The communist philosophy states that without politics existing in the way that it does, then you manipulate the markets directly and you have the ability to seize the means of production. So if you don't believe in quote unquote full-blown communism, but you do believe in the community aspects of it or the Marxist tenets of it, then I think inherently you're going to get to the point where you have to take up some form of opposition that I would view as being illegal in any state that I'd want to live in, or immoral to any degree. And I don't think you can really get away from that within the philosophy. Now, again, I could be wrong in the sense that there are individuals that believe differently, and that's fine. But the vast majority of that movement is going to tip that way when the scales come down the way.
I'm not going to say that's not possible. Here's what I'll say. I'm not the best guy to answer that.
By the way, I think Haidt's work shows that, and his studies in the brain and things like that, and what he was able to show.
I like some of what he's
because you're certainly not going to see those principles and the full testing spectrum within the anarchist, ANCAP, or hardcore right-leaning libertarian community that you will see within the ANCOM or any sort of COM community.
All right. How about this? The best person to answer this, who really got me into the whole coalition thing, because actually I used to be like you guys before. I'm like, yeah, screw the ANCOM, they suck. Let's hang out with like maybe some of the more conservative types. And I changed my tune, but whenever you're doing this next, I'll bring on a guest and he'll go.
Yeah. I want to close out here because it's getting late. I'll read these chats real quick. So on the clip we watched, Lib Right wants liberty from state oppression and the freedom to exchange with one another in pursuit of their own interests. Lib Left wants freedom from economic burdens and views liberty as removal of obstacles, including economic ones. This fundamental difference, the freedom to associate and the freedom from economic burdens, are not as compatible as the guy in the video thinks. Yeah, I'd agree. They're just not. They don't mesh as well as he's letting on to be, and I don't think they can be narrowed down to that close of a difference in views, because I think, again, just like the Palestine-Israel analogy, you have a bunch of smaller subgroups within those two bigger groups who also disagree on a bunch of different topics. You might compare European Orthodox Jews who moved to Israel to another group of Jews who disagree with that
I'm
group of Jews.
I'm not saying, to be fair, I'm not saying like every single faction in that group.
I agree with what you said. What you said was spot on.
I'm sure they're AIM-CAP. They're like, to be fair, when I went in the syndicalist chat, there are people who literally think I want to promote neo-feudalism. I'm not kidding. Those people,
I don't.
There are AIM-CAPs who are super conservative too, who are just like, almost like purists, like, hey man, I don't want anything to do with anybody who's kind of outside the ANCAP sphere. So I get that, but I think there could be some commonalities outside the meme. I don't know.
Right. No, I agree with you.
Get my coalitionist buddy to help me out here because I'm failing.
All right. Well, I think we'll close it out here. This one a little longer than I thought it was. I will catch you guys in the next episode. Go follow Kareem and me on Twitter and Facebook and all the good stuff, and check out any other content that we got coming out in the future. We got more stuff and some cool interviews coming on. Take